Dreams of the Disturbed is the sophomore full-length album from Coffin Rot, a Portland, Oregon-based death metal quartet, and one that they kind of came out of the gates with a couple of pretty big demos with kind of an autopsy-esque sound to them. The vocalist was kind of over the top. They stood out at a time where Portland was just kind of overflowing with death metal bands, and this was a good one. It was one that really felt like they understood the old school, and they weren't just imitating it. They were kind of finding their own path through it, and that showed on that demo. So clearly their focus was on old school death metal, and that continued through their A Monument to the Dead full-length album, which was impressive but also kind of unexpectedly gnarly. It had a lot of different types of riffs. It was a little bit more technical in terms of the knots that it drew with its rhythms, and it still kind of stayed true to the early Grave and Autopsy and even early Cannibal Corpse-esque thrashing kind of sound. There was a little bit of thrash metal, there was a little bit of the brutal death metal touch to it, but it really was kind of a modern but pretty authentic take on old school death metal. And I think back in 2019, that was kind of the norm. There was a lot of bands that were really getting there, but I was waiting for that thing that pushed them over the edge. Like, well, like, how is this band going to last? And we've seen this with other bands like Petrification and others from the area. They either split or they take quite a long time to return. And the magic of the scene and what was happening at the time is kind of gone, as it felt like a lot of that stuff was following a trend at the time. And I wasn't really sure, is this a band that's part of a trend, or are they coming up with something cool on the way forward? For me, the thing I was looking forward to with a second full-length album from the band was that they have these interesting kind of grinding Carcass-esque sounds to them. They come up with these riffs that feel like they could be from that era and be influenced by that, but not in such an obvious way. So I guess going into Dreams of the Disturbed, I was looking for more depth, and we'll cut to a clip here and we'll see what did I get out of it and what's new here and what's just kind of what they've always been doing. So the thing that they've kind of done here is essentially cut back on the number of riffs and make sure every riff has a purpose. That doesn't mean that they've made a groove metal album so much as they've worked in riffs that make sense one after another. They make songs out of those riffs, and it sounds more like classic death metal because of it. All of it feels intentional, and it's not just a scatterbrained working away as much as you can do, as fast as you can do, to kind of distract from a low level of songwriting. And really, the bar is not that high for songwriting in old school death metal anyway, so most people should be able to get to that point. And I think these guys do a great job of it while still working in a kind of a modern sound that still has a little bit of that groove to it. They could still go toe to toe with a band like Skeletal Remains. You know, they could open up for a band like Obituary, and it would still make sense because they do have that same core root of influence from early Death and Asphyx and all that in their sound. They've still got thrash riffs in there. They've got great production values overall. The mix, the master, the engineering of it all is pretty fantastic, and it really emphasizes that every instrument is important, and what they're doing makes sense. It matters. There's nobody's just freaking out and sucking it up. You know, this is a pretty solid band, and they make each of these 33 minutes count. And there aren't a lot of bands that can really manage that these days without coming up with slop. And I think that's the cool thing about this record for me, is there's no slop on it. There's no garbage. There's no filler. They just kind of cut right through it. There's a couple of big dumb mosh riffs when called for, but overall, I think it's just a good death metal album. It feels like a death metal album I can listen to without feeling like it's 2024 too hard. You know, it does feel like this is a classic band, or a band that just loves classic death metal, and they're not trying to insert hip hop. They're not trying to insert whatever's popular now. It's not a progressive record. It's just a death metal record, and a great one. And I think that really counted for a lot for me. I love picking up a record like this. It's really refreshing just to get right to it. And it's an interesting pick for Maggot Stomp, because I would expect there to be like a hardcore angle or whatever, but this is just straight good death metal. It kicks ass most of the way through. Couple of just okay songs, but all of them hit for me, and I think that as a fan, I love this type of record. It gets a high recommendation from me. It releases on September 20th, tomorrow, and go check it out. I think it's worth it if you're a fan of classic death metal and you want see what a younger band has to do with that sound that is worthwhile and smart enough to make every moment count on a record that doesn't waste your time. So go ahead and read my review if you'd like more of my thoughts in depth, and check it out when it's out.